Hi, everybody. Welcome to our next episode, The Value of Art. And I'm going to leave the introduction to an extremely respected and reputed artist, photographer. Over to you, Drake.
Hey, thanks, Vin. So today we're going to talk about what the value of art is in today's world. And as everybody knows, art's been around for long before any of us were. It takes many forms, from drawings to paintings, sculptures, music, acting, photography. There's so many different forms. It's hard to count them all. Um, and historically, there's evidence of art going back over 70,000 years to some cave engravings in the Blombos cave in sub-Saharan Africa. So the history of humanity and art um, is very, very long. And it's obviously been important uh, because it's kept going on and increasing in different forms as societies have increased. Um, so art's been shown nowadays to improve mental health. It reduces stress, enhances mood, fosters self-expression and social connections. And these benefits from art can be seen whether you're the one viewing the art or you're the one creating the art. Um, Doing simple things uh, artistically in a repetitive motion, whether it's drawing or painting or anything else, this all promotes a calming effect and relaxation. Um, and at the same time, it stimulates the brain and the brain's pleasure centers, which lead to more positive mood, happiness, and it also can help improve your cognitive abilities, focus, and memory. So art has a lot of positive interactions with the individuals and with the group society at large. Um, when it's done in a group activity, whether it's together doing the activity or just viewing it, it can bring people together and it can create discussions over topics that are examined in art, whether it be a painting of an event or anything else. If it's somewhat controversial, it can sometimes start those discussions and have healthy discussions rather than um, confrontational. People try to interpret the art and understand what it means. So there's a lot of positive effects from it, and I think we can move forward from here knowing that when we view art, when we create art, we are doing something positive for ourselves and for others. And I'll just leave it there for now and pass it off to our next speaker.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kirstyn.
Okay. So when we chose the topic last session and I thought about our panelists, my husband, a best-selling author, Drake, a featured artist for his breathtaking nature photography, Paulina, a phenomenal painter and interior designer, and of course, Tulip, a celebrated Bollywood star, now being commissioned for her stunning paintings. I didn't think that I would really have much to offer. I'm not an artist and I'm not an art therapist, but I think art has a significant role in the psychology field. I work closely with therapists who integrate art into their clinical practice, especially with children. And because of that, I get to witness how art becomes something of a lifeline for many kids. Many children don't have the cognitive or emotional tools to explain what they're feeling, especially when those feelings are complex, overwhelming, or rooted in something painful. But what can't be verbalized still shows up in other ways, whether that's meltdowns, aggressions, shutting down, withdrawing, and it gets stored up in the body and in the nervous system. And this is where I've seen art become quite essential. When a child has access to crayons, paints, or clay, they suddenly have access to a language, one that doesn't require vocabulary or eye contact or even conscious understanding. The colors, the textures, and images that they create become the vessel for sharing their internal truths. And it becomes this safe container. And then I was also thinking of the role of music and music playing an incredibly powerful role in certain therapeutic containers, um, such as therapy in altered states of consciousness or in conscious connected breath work. These modalities shift from kind of that top down approach of traditional therapy, which is kind of thinking our way into feeling better, and moves into that bottom up approach, which is feeling our way into thinking differently. And in these spaces, it's not the verbal mind that leads, it's the body, the nervous system, and the emotional core. And music plays a really vital role in that guide. Um, a facilitator will carefully select instrumental music that helps shape the kind of emotional arc of the session. We'll often begin with something very grounding and then build with this activating, sometimes kind of tribal, pulsating rhythm, and then reach a cinematic peak and then soften into this soothing, integrative melody. And the music is often able to evoke what words can't reach. It taps into memory, grief, longing, release, often without needing to name the experience. I've watched people cry, tremble, laugh, or reconnect with something long buried while being led through this process, and I've experienced it myself. And in this sense, I think music is a big part of the medicine. Additionally, I think of Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote the foundational book on trauma, The Body Keeps the Score. He writes about the use of theater and movement in trauma recovery, how stepping into a role or enacting a story helps people access parts of themselves that trauma may have shut down. And one of the quotes from his book was, "Imagination is absolutely critical to the quality of our lives. Imagination gives us the opportunity to envision new possibilities. It is an essential launch pad for making our hopes come true." And I love this quote because it speaks to not just unpacking what was, but also imagining what could be. And art in all its forms, I believe, has the potential to open that door. So while I fully defer to the artists here when it comes to craft and creative brilliance, I'd say from the psychological side, art doesn't just beautify the world, but it gives us a way to express, to process, and sometimes to heal. And that to me is an extraordinary kind of value.
Thank you. Thank you. I can go next. Paulina, your hand was also there, so can you go after me?
Yeah, after you, absolutely. Yeah.
Super. Um, I'm going to differ from Kirstyn here in a bit, but the English word art comes from the French word art, which in turn comes from Latin, and it means skill, craftsmanship, practical knowledge, method, and technique. To me, art is expression. It gives a sense of freedom, rebellion. Art can be cathartic, it can be healing. Art isn't limited to acting or dancing or sculpting or drawing. One of my favorite books of art is Sun Tzu, The Art of War. So, art can go all over. And where I differed from Kirstyn is that um, Dr. Kirstyn is a therapist. And I think being an effective therapist is also an art. You can say a certain set of words and deliver them in a certain way, and that can be triggering for somebody. And the same words in the same way can be just healing for someone else. And it really is an art to know what to say, when, to whom. And I think art is rooted in imagination and presence, being completely present and dipping into your imagination. A few um, quotes I can say. Plato viewed art as an imitation of reality and potentially misleading. Aristotle saw art as a form of representation with a role in understanding the world. Nietzsche emphasized art's power to transcend difficult realities and nourish the soul. Art can be used by the pretentious and the powerful to establish dominance, and it's also a known tool for money laundering. I'll hand over to Paulina.
That's great. Thank you. I love Kirstyn's contribution tonight. I have to say, I just love it. Am I on now? Yes, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. So, this was a very interesting topic for me because, as you know, I'm in the field of art, and as a kid, um, I always felt like I am a sponge, and I'm not claiming that that's the part that makes me an artist, because I think we all human beings are like a sponge. We get a lot of information coming from every possible place. Some of it is conscious, some of it is subconscious. And it's almost like with the element of translating that into a piece, you summarize and you create that essence that needs to come out. And so, for me, art is not something so unattainable. I think everybody can do it. There's a word in Japanese called narikiru, from Zen, which basically means to be 100% present to something. So I believe that painting, sculpture, writing, those are chosen tools, but a person can be a very good executor of music without actually being an artist. A person can be a very well writer without actually giving you art. A person can draw the most beautiful flowers mechanically and still not give you art. Because for me, art has it's you have to be completely detached from an outcome. It cannot be planned. It's kind of like when if you're having a conversation, there's an immediacy that comes with it. And I believe if you're so present to it, sometimes things you were not planning to say or even think come out. To me, that's exactly what happens when you're producing art. There's an honesty and a sincerity that just comes out. And you can be doing gardening, you can be doing cooking, you can be doing accounting, medicine, psychology. I don't care what you're doing. If you're bringing that honesty and presence to the moment, I believe you're actually experiencing what art is meant to help you do. And, sometimes people have this little bit of a distinction between what is a craft. You can be a fantastic person drawing and repeat over and over the same craft. I and still not get that, so for me, that's one important element of art, to have that immediate thing. And it's also a law. I think love is like that. When you're in love with somebody, when you're in love with a craft or with something, you have endless amount of energy. And this is going to sound a little bit weird, but there have been times in my life when I am creating something, but there is no I'm not there. It is almost like the painting or the material is calling me to do something, but me does not exist. And I'm not going to say that that happens to me all the time, very, very rarely. And I think that is almost that narikiru, that complete giving yourself without expectation, without I don't know how to call it. Now, when you're talking about the importance of art, I think true art is a very strong expression of love to for what you're doing, and people can absolutely feel the love that you have put into something that you're doing. And it is we can all understand when art has that element. So that's what I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I hand over to Denise, a quick response from me. I think both Paulina and I touched upon the importance of imagination and presence. Just a quick question for everyone, which we can address as we go along. Can AI create true art? I'll hand over to Denise. Thank you.
Thanks, Vin. I've got a good response for that. So, art to me is one of the purest expressions of what it means to be human. It comes from that creative energy that we all carry, whether we call it inspiration or imagination, as it's already been mentioned, or even something deeper, like utilizing our sacral chakra. That same energy that creates life also can create beauty, meaning, chaos, and structure through art. And whether it's visual, musical, or something else entirely, that creative spark is part of who we are. I truly feel that. When we talk about the value of art, perspective comes into play. And it really is, to me, in the eye of the beholder. So, what one person sees as genius, another might completely dismiss. But at the same time, there are these shared ideas in society, often shaped by culture or conditioning, that tells us what is valuable or great art, so to speak. Someone might look at Jackson Pollock's work and say, well, that's just paint splattered on a canvas. But there's something in the randomness or what looks like chaos that speaks to people. And it's almost like the art makes sense once it connects to something inside of you. And that's to me where the value lives. I've been very fortunate where I've had the chance to see some major, amazing artwork in person, Van Gogh, Michelangelo. And what hits me every time is it's not just the skill, but the fact that these were people, like actual human beings who followed their calling even when the world told them not to. When I think of Michelangelo, his father thought he was wasting his life. Initially, he struggled and he doubted, and yet he still created some of the most impactful works of art in history, whether it was sculpture, whether it was painting, the Sistina Capella, um, just unbelievable. But he was eventually supported by the Medici family for sure, but it started with faith in his own vision. And, we talk about, Kirstyn mentioned music. Um, Art isn't just visual, of course. I think about music and I take someone like Ozzy Osbourne, for example, who's just recently passed. I started playing the electric guitar because of Sabbath. And I thought that was, I think of, his music wasn't everyone's cup of tea. But if it weren't for him, whole branches of music might not even exist. Um, and that is like, to me, the ripple effect of following your heart as an artist. It inspires. That, if I had one word, it's inspired, inspires others. It breaks molds and it changes what comes next. It shapes our culture, our future, and it's in every part of the world. And as Drake mentioned, I mean, it's not just our time. We're talking, many, many eons ago that we've seen this happening. Um, and also too, what's sacred to one culture might another culture might not understand at all. And that's kind of the point though, because art is an expression and it's a connection. It doesn't always need to make sense. It just needs to be real to the person interpreting it. And for me, I guess that's why I also like to create. I paint. I do a lot of photography. Grew up with a dad who's a professional photographer, so we had like a dark room in the house and everything. It was our second bathroom. And I've put my own musical pieces together and renditions for the sound baths that I create and lead. So I might not be a Michelangelo or an Ozzy Osbourne, but I feel what I create still matters. And it's my way of expressing myself, and that has value, um, because I know it's part of who I am. When I was 3 years old, my mom had a lot of makeup, and I used to take her lipstick and I would draw with her lipstick. She obviously wasn't watching me at the time, but they could put me in a corner all through my childhood with paper, pencils, crayons, whatever it was, and I would just immerse myself into that, and it was absolutely wonderful, and I'm so grateful as an adult that I'm still able to do things like that. So, not with lipstick anymore though.
Thank you, Denise. I didn't know all that about you. Super impressive. Thank you. Our next speaker is again a hugely popular and successful artist. She's won several awards, including national and international awards. And she recently uh, put up the art in a fancy penthouse in Vancouver, which I think should be up for people to visit, but it's a private home. Over to you, Tulip.
Thank you so much. That's so kind of you. Oh my God, I started, my art just a year and a half ago, but it seems like I've been, it's been a part of me for my entire life. For me, art is being in a meditative state. Um, it is the energy you create. It's an extension of your own energy. And each piece to me, I treat it like an altar. It's not like, oh, and it's healing. And I think it's very important that we all should try it in some form, even if we don't want to like monetize it. It's just for your personal growth. And I've started understanding myself better just by creating art. You reach a space where the hidden parts of you, they just come alive. And I think that's pretty profound.
Thank you. Thank you, Tulip. Who'd like to go next? Over to Joe, who is a content engineer and an interpreter of the Bible. Both, I think, require a lot of art.
Yes, I will, I guess, disclose I am not an artist. My mother is quite a heavyweight. So she's one of the big sellers of as artists go here in Victoria. So I always get asked, did I follow in her footsteps? And I said, no, the genes skipped this generation. They just skipped right over me. But that said, and then there's some truth to that because all of my 4 kids are actually quite good artists and in different media. So there may be something to that theory. I was thinking, I wanted to touch on a philosopher who is near and dear to my heart these days, a guy named Hans-Georg Gadamer. And he's interesting in part because he lived for 102 years and was teaching almost to the day he died, which is amazing. But he basically lived the entire span of the 20th century. And he is, I think his star continues to grow and rise in the world of philosophy. And so he was a phenomenologist and a hermeneutist, like looking at the art, basically, of interpretation. What's interesting, he's got a great big book, which I didn't bring in because it's kind of terrifying, this huge tome called Truth and Method, which you'd think would be about the most horrible thing to bring up in the discussion of art. In fact, his entire theory of truth starts with art. And he said that art is actually the perfect example of what truth really is. And in one of his quotes is that art is a mode of truth and that art is a happening. And I think what we've heard from everybody so far is sort of bouncing back and forth between the creator and the need to express and the viewer or listener or reader, the person who's, and one of the things that Gadamer, I think, brings out delightfully is that art actually happens as an event when these two perspectives come together. And one of his phrases is fusion of horizons. So just as we heard, art can be almost like a summation, which I think is something that you touched on, Paulina, a summation of somebody's experience, their worldview. But then the reader has the same thing and brings their view. And that's why, for example, seeing Michelangelo over the centuries, or even a cave piece of cave art over the millennia, we see, it was created in a very specific world. But then we come at it with eyes from a totally different world. And by bringing those horizons together, we actually really get close to human truth. So it's a little bit of a digression into metaphysics and ontology and epistemology, but I find it fascinating that for a Gadamer, art is the penultimate expression of how we as humans know. And so I'll pause there, but I'll come back later.
Thank you, Joe. Over to Kevin. Paulina, I'll come to you after Kevin, if you don't mind. I'm on a roll with fancy introductions today. So over to Kevin, person who's perfecting the art of relationships.
I think my wife would offer a good rebuttal. Right now, just thinking about how I remember a Canadian comedy series. I guess it was called, Red Green. And so it was watching an episode that shortly came out after there was a big controversy of a piece of art in the National Gallery in Ottawa. It's called The Voice of Fire, which was something on a blue background with just a red stripe down it. And I'm of the red-green philosophy is, like Joe, if I can do it, it's not art. So on that viewpoint, I'm coming at it just as a normal Joe and saying art is important. I think of how it makes people feel. The emotions that come out makes you feel alive and connects you to other people. I just remember this is the 50th anniversary of the movie Jaws. And I remember watching it. They've been people who have never seen the movie are on YouTube reacting to seeing Jaws. And it is always funny to see them just go and jump out of their seats and then they start laughing. And so the shock and the horror, it connected them to, the emotion of being afraid. And that is so human. Also, looking at other films where you feel great sadness. Comes to mind is the Schindler's List, where I think in the beginning there was it was all black and white except for this little girl in this pink coat, and you're following through, and you get emotionally invested, and it's not going to end well. And when you see just the pink coat at the end, how devastating that was, and how sad I felt, and it just uh, the art brought such good emotions to bear, and saying this is a situation that though it might have been completely fictional with that girl in the pink coat, it symbolized so much to me. So I appreciate art. I may not be an artist, but I know if I see an art piece or a film or a TV show or whatever that brings an emotion to me, I gravitate toward it, and I look at the price and see, okay, if I do buy this, where do I put it in the house? Because we do have a lot of art in our home, but art's very important, even for the average person, that Joe Schmo like me. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Paulina, over to you.
Okay, just short touching on, can AI create art? For me, no. AI cannot create art. Because, see, when I was referring as the human brain or the human experience as a sponge where we bring in experiences and then we process it. The process is not to put out necessarily information as data, but there's a lot of emotion So emotion is basically emotion, something to move. It moves us. And there's a lot of see, when a concept comes alive through art at any particular time, it's usually because through art something of a universal feeling that everybody can identify and be touched by it. People have already been feeling something, but they don't quite know how to put it in words. And so I'm just thinking, for instance, of that picture of this, it's an older picture of photograph of a girl in Vietnam War. She's running with her hand extended. So when we all see that, so many people were against that war in the States, and so many people have disgust, but they had not, their emotion inside was not strong enough in an identifiable way that they were not able to move themselves to get something more strong into action. So with art of that kind that summarizes how all of us are internally boiling with some kind of an emotion, that one picture that speaks 1,000 words, literally, it gives voice to all of us who are actually feeling that. So to me, the power of art is that. And so also in therapy, when a child is not able to express themselves, they may not have enough vocabulary, they not have enough ways of saying, but with the picture or with something that comes from the emotion, you can translate that feeling that other human being can identify. And so to me, AI has a lot of input from all over the world, from information for everybody, but there isn't really that universal emotion that needs to connect to. There's just information put together, it's like an average of the nice picture, the average of good summary or whatever. So that's my answer to no, AI cannot create art, my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, we have rejoined us from Tulip, followed by Denise.
Uh, I defer my opinion here. I think AI can be considered art because it depends on prompting itself is an art, like how you prompt, because you can also create art with on a normal canvas and just make a sketch and say that's art, versus someone who really put in effort and create art, be it a digital piece or it could be a film. Then tomorrow we'll have people saying let's not make films, we should go and watch live plays, or let's not have machines. So I think yeah, it depends on how it's done. So yeah, I believe AI can create art, and the person who prompts, that makes a lot of a difference.
Thank you. Over to you, Denise. And I think, Paulina, you had a response, so you can go after Denise, please.
Yeah, I see both Paulina's perspective and Tulip's. I have just a funny story that probably leans a little more towards Paulina's perspective. Um, so when I created something called an astral travel gong bath, and I had written the meditation, and now I was looking for a visual. And I of course I had pictures of my gong that I could use, but I thought, how cool would it be to somehow imbue the astral aspect? And so I asked ChatGPT to, and I'm pretty good with the prompts, right? I'm pretty good at using those. And anyway, ended up in this huge argument with ChatGPT because it kept giving me a picture that looked like you were on another planet, and I didn't want that as my visual for, an inviting relaxing meditation. It looked like a group of hostile aliens are surrounding a gong, and so I kept going back and saying, "No, this is not what I want. I want you to do this, I want you to do that," and I was very specific, but it could not produce anything that would be, in my mind anyway, would be recognized as something, that could be useful for what I was looking for. So I thought that was quite funny to be going I back and forth and still ending up it couldn't get past. And I don't know if it was that particular, with OpenAI, if it was just that platform. And maybe they're all a little different, but it was quite funny. I mean, I wasn't really laughing at the time. It was more frustration. But I also have seen the opposite, where some of the art digitally that can be created is beautiful. The challenge going forward, though, is what I see in social media th- is digitally created art or visuals that are made by, like, they're obviously made by AI, but people take them as real. And that to me is where things, and when I say real, I'm talking about if it's portraying people or situations that aren't actually happening. But it looks realistic enough where people then believe that, and then you now have what I call in my world toxic discourse, where you're now, people are being misinformed or not understanding what they're looking at, and the question becomes, how do you now tell the difference, and how important is that?
Thank you. Paulina, followed by Joe and then Drake, I think.
Okay. So I just like to make a very distinction, because I can see that it's very easily mixed, right? I have a daughter, and as far as I'm concerned, she's a digital artist, and she heavily uses AI. And she does fantastic prompts. Then she gets the images, and then she makes them look exactly the way she wants. And they express exactly the feeling and the emotion that she wants. That's how I defined her as actually as an artist. She is the artist, is not AI. So when I'm talking about can AI create art, I am talking about, can there be a point where AI is so independent that just with a very minor click of a button, it will produce art? It will never happen. This is no different than another tool to create art. It's like a camera for a photographer. Photographer is not painting the landscape, but they're choosing the light, they're choosing the speed of the lens, they're choosing the elements of the composition. When you are asking AI to give you a picture, and then you're bringing that and you're tweaking it, and what my daughter does is she basically starts manipulating it. She changes the colors with her hand, like with her own tools, with a pen or whatever. So it is another extension of a tool, but I still don't call that AI. That's my daughter using AI as a tool. So it's a big difference between the two. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, well, a couple of similar experiences. I remember a book club. My late wife would go to a book club, and one of the novels they read, was they thought particularly heartrending. It was so full of emotion, and of course, I sent along my comment with my wife that was completely unwelcome. I said I could generate this with AI, and of course, this led to a great dust up. And the rebuttal was, but there was so much emotion. And channeling sort of the dark side, I said, nothing is more predictable or more easily manipulated than emotion. So when we're thinking about AI, just be warned, that is the one thing AI is going to be good at. So just a word to the wise. And I'm a technologist, so I'm partly to blame. On the happy side, when I have an aunt, I guess a half aunt in Vancouver, and she lost her horse after many, many, many years. So this was a catastrophic loss. So everyone in the family pitched in and made a piece of art to go into a book. So I thought it was a beautiful idea. Of course, being bereft of any artistic talent, I had to use AI. I had no choice. But and to pick up on the point that Tulip first touched on, the effort I put into my prompting. My prompts were almost like multi-page programs. And eventually I got it to produce a rendition of her horse, Boxer, that was so good that it was chosen by everybody, including the heavyweight artists like my mom, as the cover of the book. So, but it's true, there was a lot of me in there. Like I had to fine tune, it was ridiculous. Um, but, but, ultimately then to circle back and say, if we take anything of what I touched on earlier about the relationship of art to the fundamental substratum of truth, then AI does have some challenges. So in a more recent time, of course, if there's an art form with which I'm most familiar, it would be poetry. And the one thing AI really can't do at all is write poetry. Its poetry is beyond terrible. Like on the visual side, yes, they might drop you on the moon or put you on the rings of Saturn, but the poetry is unbearably bad. So almost we use it. And so my partner now is a poet. And she's been really, and she's a very tough trainer. Like she sort of falls on the side of art as closer to artifice. That it is, you need to master the craft in order to then express your world or reach other people. Like you have a lot of work to do. So she is a tough taskmaster. And she has found, even though the AIs are terrible at writing poetry, she can train them to be quite good poetry reviewers and to sort of give you non-stupid feedback. So within again, it comes back to the prompting. But we know if you actually got it to try and write anything, it would go downhill very quickly. But I'll stop there.
Thank you. Over to you, Dre.
Yeah, I think go back to what Tulip said, and has sort of been repeated by others, that AI, depending on the prompts being put in, can be art, right? It's those prompts that shape it. Um, at some point in the future, I don't think you can rule out that it would be able to create something on its own. I don't think we're there yet. Um, and I also don't think it's quite at the point where it's going to replace artists. There's always been technologies that come along, whether it's better paints or brushes or film cameras and digital cameras and different software. So there's always something else coming along, but most of those other mediums still exist. And um, there's a value in going out and creating the art yourself, for yourself and for those with you. Um, and if you want to do that by using a program, an AI, that is another way to create. But I don't think it has to necessarily replace anything else. I- The issue with it becomes when people don't understand that it's artificially created. Um, if you're looking at it just for the art value, the art sake of it, then that might not be an issue. If you're representing it as this is something that you painted or you went on this trip and took these photos there, then I think that's a different story. But as far as being able to create art by giving prompts and that, I think we're at the state that yeah, we can consider that art right now.
Thank you, Drake. Quick thought from my side is that AI today is somewhere where computers were a few decades ago. I remember when Bill Gates said 40 MB is enough for any and everything you need. I think AI is somewhere near that state. In fact, it's hardly even come in. What we have right now is more of just chatbots and GPT. So maybe a decade from now or 5 years from now, I wonder where we'll be. Any other thoughts, anybody? On the value of art? Yes, Joe. You're muted.
No, now. No, yeah, I know him. But back on poetry again. My recent introduction to poetry and sort of the craft one of the things that I really found was fascinating was a big part of the discipline was to consciously think about your audience and to, quote unquote, build space for your audience in your art. It's almost like reaching out to sort of create a connection. And for a lot of people, when they think of poetry, just to zero in on that form of art, as almost like a journal entry, it's purely the expression of their experience, and that is one thing. And of course, my tough taskmaster in the world of poetry says, no, that's a journal entry. That's not poetry. Poetry is a consciously crafted work of art that intentionally helps the reader go through a similar journey. So, and this comes back to, again, the nerdiness of Gadamer about art as being very, what we call, dialogic. In other words, it's sort of an interplay between the creator and the viewer, or the creator, the poet, and the reader, and that in fact what constitutes the work of art is what happens in that event between them. And even more obscurely, if we take the word dialogic and look at what it actually means through. It means doing something together. It's more about the outcome and what is produced rather than sort of just two people talking at each other. It's actually at what can transcend. But I'll stop there.
Thank you, Joe. Any other thoughts, anyone? Yes, Paulina.
And just another thought about AI. I mean, I still look at it only as a tool. And even 30 years from now, by itself, it will never be able to make art. That's my opinion. Because art, in so many ways, is a depiction of your inner world, your inner experience. So AI, as good as it gets, it will never be able to have that inner experience. It's not alive. That's so it doesn't have the levels of consciousness that a human being does. So I see more possible, part of my thought, a dolphin creating art, an elephant. They may have more of an inner life than an AI. So yes, we can create a lot of AI prompted art, but it's still not AI's production. It's still our production. We are making it through AI. So that's my point.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, Joe.
Okay. You want to go? You want to go on AI? You asked for it. No, actually, I agree entirely. And in fact, as I've shared recently, my PhD research is basically about using AI in, of all things, management education. And in that scenario, we're not looking at AI doing anything, usurping any responsibility. In fact, its only use is as a sounding board so that the people can think better. So if we have risks with AI, it's that it's not the artificial intelligence that's the problem, it's human stupidity. And the general trend that we have of just offloading responsibility at wherever we figure we can put it and get away with it. But in the work that I'm doing, it's fascinating because if I can pull things, so life experiences from managers, they're working in managing a factory, or they're doing this and they're doing, we can pull all this, I abstract it so it's not discernibly from Bob or Harold or Sheila, like it's very, but then I can put it into an AI, and then we basically can talk to the AI and say, what does the group think? How do these, where are we having common problems? And it never becomes back as a spotlight on, what did you say, Joe? But it sort of allows us, it provides this huge mirror for us to then interact with. So in fact, it's as you said, Paulina, it's actually AI helping the people do something better. And in that particular case, back to the art of war, Ben, one other form, like we can look at art in very specific experiential, even therapeutic contexts, or we can expand it out and say, wouldn't it be great if we could, approach the world, writ large or very big things with an artistic view to making them better? And so this work that I'm doing, it's like trying to use AI as a laddering device to get people to think better. Stop again.
Thank you, Joe. That was enlightening. Any other thoughts, anybody? Looks like we are at the end of our discussion. Thank you, everyone. It's been entertaining and enlightening. It was fun. Thank you so much.